Sometimes you hear it said, or perhaps you've thought it or said it yourself in some sort of easy breezy sort of way. Why can't God just accept us? Sure, we're guilty, we're not as good as we could be, but, just forgive and forget. And we say it like that, we phrase it like that, and it's a nice idea. But before we go any further, I just want us to be crystal clear about this point. When we see how God acts, how God intervenes in Jesus, how drastic it is, how severe and serious it is, that should help us to see that the scenario, that the story, the situation we find ourselves in is much more serious than we usually give it credit for. We are in that situation, and what happens in John's Gospel, chapters 18, chapters 19, where we'll spend our time today, we'll see that simply accepting us really isn't an option. We all know that Jesus died. It's part of our shared history, culturally, in our society. It's a well-known fact. Let's begin, though, by thinking about the cause of death. I'm going to begin reading, and we're going to read a lot from John's Gospel, chapters 18 and 19. And I'm going to begin reading at verse 19. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. I've spoken openly to the world, Jesus answered him. I've always taught in the synagogue and in the temple where all the Jews congregate, and I haven't spoken anything in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who heard what I told them. Look, they know what I said. When he had said these things, one of the officials standing by slapped Jesus, saying, Is this the way you answer the high priest? If I have spoken wrongly, Jesus answered him, give evidence about the wrong, but if rightly, why do you hit me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. This is the first interrogation of Jesus, if you like, after his arrest. And there's no charge brought. There's no evidence presented. He's simply abused and sent to the next authority. If you like, in our legal system, where when we don't find an answer at one level, we keep sending it up and up and up and up, hoping that a decision will go our way. Picking it up in verse 28. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They did not enter the headquarters themselves, otherwise they would be defiled and unable to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and said, What charge do you bring against this man? They answered him, If this man weren't a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you. And it's laughable if it wasn't so serious. When they deliver him to the hands of the highest authority they can, they have to pretend that they have some charge against him. If he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him. Of course not. They don't even really know what they're accusing him of. Verse 38, Pilate, having spent some time questioning Jesus, says this, I find no grounds for charging him. I find no grounds for charging him. Up until this point, they've struggled to accuse Jesus, let alone even find or present any evidence against him. Having been through 1, 2, 3 courts, Jesus has been found innocent. The highest authority at the time says, I find no grounds for charging him. But this is what happens next. Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers also twisted together a crown, put it on his head, and clothed him in a purple robe. And they kept coming up to him and saying, Hail, King of the Jews, and were slapping him in the face. Pilate went outside again and said to them, Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no grounds for charging him. Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the temple servants saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify," having just been declared for a second time totally innocent. "We have a law," the Jews replied, "and according to that law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." And at last the truth comes out. The true answer, that Jesus' only crime was revealing himself to be God made flesh. I think what we have here is the perfect picture of our own hearts. We can't quite figure out why we should be rejecting Jesus, but we want to reject him at all costs. See, Jesus, if you've taken the time to read John's Gospel over the last couple of weeks, is someone who comes into our lives and declares himself to be God, reveals himself to be God. And we say, "No, you're not. Be gone with you." It's a terrifying picture of what goes on in our own hearts. But still, there's no great answer as to why he died. Because up until this point, no one has had the guts to call Jesus, to declare him guilty. Certainly not worthy of death. And yet, die he does. Chapter 19, verses 17 and 18. Carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and two others with him, one on either side, with Jesus in the middle. Verse 28, after this, when Jesus knew that everything was now finished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, he said, "I'm thirsty," and a jar full of sour wine was sitting there. So they fixed a sponge full of sour wine on a hyssop branch and held it up to his mouth. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. I did say it was a serious business, didn't I? Whatever is going on here, whatever is going on in the whole of John's Gospel, the story of Jesus coming, whatever is going on in the big story of God and us and how we relate to one another, it's so much more than our flippant, "Why can't he just forgive and move on" sort of nonsense. Because this, what happened to Jesus, was deliberate. What happened to Jesus was part of God's plan. What happened to our author was written in his own handwriting.